A very simple but very important project for beginners, and all this is a web page that has a circle which is centered exactly in the middle of the screen from all sides, and when you refresh it, the numbers changes randomly, and the page is generating numbers from 0 to 10, and this is important for two reasons. One, it has some important CSS concepts in that how to center something exactly in the middle of the screen, which can be difficult for some people, and how to generate numbers randomly using simple JavaScript. So without wasting time, I'll change the size of my browser, and this is the folder that has this script. If I open it up, this is the HTML document that we were using. So I will drag and drop it onto my Visual Studio Code to open this folder in Visual Studio Code. So this is the document that we were looking at now, and I will click on this new file icon, and I will simply call it index.html. So save it, and if I change the size of my browser, my editor, I'll decrease the size of this browser so you can see things side by side, and minimize this text editor. Double click on the folder, and this is the new document index.html that we have just created. Double click on it, and this is a blank document. I will minimize the Explorer, and I will type in an exclamation mark and press tab to create a basic boilerplate or basic HTML skeleton, and I will call it random numbers. I will save it, and you'll see that the document now says random numbers. So within the body area, I will create two divs, so hash symbol and first, and within this div I will create a child div with the ID of second, and press tab, and child div has been created that has an ID of second. This is the parent div, and this is the child div, because this div is enclosed within this div. Now in JavaScript term, this space between this div is known as inner HTML, and I will simply type in 2 here. So if I now save it, the inner HTML of this div will be visible on the web page. Now we can use some CSS, and to type in CSS, I'll say style, and I'll press tab. So we now have a opening style tag and a closing style tag, and we can target this div, second one, with the help of ID, and the ID of this div is second. So hash symbol second, and opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. The first thing I want to do is to change the size of the font. So I will say font size, and I'll say 200 pixels. So if I now save it and refresh it, we have a font size that is 200 pixels in size. So font family, I like Verala round for this project. So if I save it, we have a different font. So I want to change the background of this div as well. So I will target the div with the ID of first. So I will say hash symbol and first, an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. And I want to change the background color to steel blue. So if I now save it, the background color of this parent element is steel blue. We want to cover the whole height and width of the page. So I will say width 100 VW, so 100% of the view width, which it is already at the moment. So it should not make any difference at the moment. So if I refresh it, nothing happens. The page looks exactly the same as it was. But I will also change the height to 100 VH, view height. So that will cover the whole visible length of the web page. Notice that we wanted 100% of the view width and view height, but then there is a scroll bar here and there's some gap here, and there should not be any scroll bar if it is 100% width and 100% height. So the reason is there is always some default padding and default margin. So I will use a universal selector that will select the whole web page, which is star or asterisk, an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket, and I will say P0 and tab, and then I will also say M0 and tab. So the web page now has a padding of 0 and a margin of 0. So if I have saved the document, I will maximize the browser and keep an eye on this area. These should disappear as I refresh the page. If I refresh it now, there's no padding and there are no scroll bars. So I will change the size of my browser one more time. Next thing, I want to create a box around this number 2. So I will target this div, this one, with the help of ID, and I will say border 20 pixels, solid yellow, for example. So if I now save it and refresh it, we have a border around the element which is 20 pixels in thickness. Maybe this is too much, so I'll change it to 15. That would be a bit more appropriate. Refresh it and it's a bit smaller now. The next thing I want to do is to apply a width of maybe 400 pixels, which should make it smaller. Refresh it and it is now smaller, and the height has to be the same, 400 pixels. The very important thing that I want to teach you now is how to center the things within an element, center anything within an element. So as you can see, this is the left top side. So I want to center this number 2 within this div. So I will say justify content and I will say center. Although justify this property, justify content center, should center the element in horizontally within this element, but as you can see, nothing has happened. That is because we also have to change the display type to flex. So if I now save it and refresh it, we have this inner HTML, as we call it in JavaScript, of this element appearing within the center of this div. I want to vertically center it as well, and once we have display flex, the align item center should vertically center this element in the center of this div, and that's what it does. So if I maximize it, refresh it, we have a div and we have this text here that is appearing within the center of this div. Now we want to center this whole div in the center of the page. So I'll change the size of my browser and we can use same 3 things. Display flex, justify content center, which will center this whole div in the horizontally in the center of the page, and then align item center will vertically align this div in the center of the page. So we have to target this first div. So I will say display flex, which should make no difference. Without these properties, it will make no difference. But if I say justify content center, that will center this content, center this div horizontally horizontally on the screen. So we also want to center it vertically. So the next property has to be align items center, which will center this whole div in the center of the page. I want to apply some border radius. So I will say border radius 20 pixels. So if I now save it, we have some border around the we have some border radius around the border of this div. If I want to make it round, I can say border radius 50%. So the radius of the border is now 50%, which creates this beautiful looking perfect circle. I want to change the color inside the circle, and I will say background color maybe blue violet. And if I now save it and refresh it, we have a background color that is purple. But the next thing that I want to do is to be able to change these numbers randomly, and we have to use JavaScript. So the main concept, the main takeaway lesson from this class is how to center the elements vertically and horizontally on a web page, and also the second thing is how to change these numbers randomly. So this is JavaScript. So just before the closing body tag, I will say script, and we now have an opening script tag and a closing script tag. And within the script tags, I will create a variable. I will call it I'll just call it num is equal to, and I'll use the math.random method, which creates random numbers between decimal numbers between 0 and 1. It will never reach 1, but we now have to find a way to show this random number. I can use the JavaScript method, which is known as document.getElement by ID, and the ID of this element is second, this one here. So I can simply copy this and just paste this here within the parentheses, and I will change the inner HTML to this variable which holds a random number. So I will say num. So if I now save it and refresh it, we should have some random numbers between 0 to 1, but it will never reach 1. So if I refresh it, we have random numbers coming up in front of us. It generates number between 0 to 0.99, but not 1. So we want to generate whole numbers. So what I can do, I can simply multiply this by 11. Okay, so notice what happens now. So if I now save it, we now have a number before the decimal. So whatever decimal number was generated, it has been multiplied by 11. So if I refresh it, you have numbers between 0 to 10. It will never reach 11. Okay, that is the important thing to remember. Now we want to get rid of these decimal digits from here. So what I will do, I will simply use another method that is known as math.floor, which will round down a number. So if I save it and if I refresh it, we have a whole number between 0 to 10. And that's how you create this simple JavaScript, and which teaches you how to generate numbers randomly in a certain range, and also how to center the elements exactly in the center of the page. Thank you very much.